Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's community webinar, sponsored by the Superior Chamber of Commerce. My name is TJ Sullivan, and I'm the Executive Director of the Chamber. I am the father of two boys. My youngest is a junior at George Washington High School in Denver. He is now starting his third semester of virtual online school, and I have to tell you, it's not going very well. He doesn't enjoy it. He isn't challenged. He misses his friends, and he approaches school with the same reluctance as when I tell him to take out the garbage. Um, we are at our wits' end trying to figure out what the heck to do to get him to engage and care about school. I was lamenting the situation with a friend of mine who is an educator, and I asked her, what do our kids even need from us right now? Like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do to make school even feel like a priority for my son. And she replied, well, that's the question we all have right now. We have no idea how this is all going to shake out and if some kids will ever recover from this disruption. And I was sitting there mulling over this just situation. And that day, an article came across my, one of my Twitter or something, and it talked about a Denver teacher being named Colorado's Teacher of the Year. And I said, wow, I wish I could ask that guy that question. And one thing led to another, and here we are. So that's how tonight started. So I'm going to introduce our panelists for the evening, and I'll ask the three of them to unmute their microphone whenever they're ready. Gerardo Munoz is a social studies teacher at the Denver Center for International Studies in the Denver Public Schools District, and he was recently named Colorado's 2021 Teacher of the Year. He has taught at the DCIS for 14 years. In his 21 years in education, Gerardo has been involved in a number of programs and initiatives to promote equity and anti-racism. He has a BA from the University of Colorado and a master's from the University of Denver. So welcome, Gerardo. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you, TJ.
Elaine Hewitt has enjoyed 3 decades of teaching French immersion and special education in Canada and in the US. So she's our international flavor for the evening. Elaine provides private tutoring, academic assessments, and works with families as a parent and student advocate under the banner of her business, Academic Assessment Solutions. Elaine is the academic advisor on the board for BVKID, and you're going to tell me what that stands for, Elaine, and teaches teachers in the Graduate Studies Department at University of Colorado. She received our Educator of the Year Award for the Superior Chamber in 2019. Holly Hansberg is a second grade teacher at Louisville Elementary School with more than 25 years of elementary teaching experience. She has also taught in the School of Education at the University of Idaho. Holly has 2 children in college and a 10th grader at Monarch High School. And she is additionally the owner of Rocky Mountain Day Camp, which is a summer day camp for children ages 4 to 15. So I'm going to be asking each of our panelists a series of questions, and hopefully they'll be able to answer several over the course of the next hour. If you have questions as a participant, I would ask you to just enter them in the chat. We will be monitoring that and throwing those questions in as we go. And there we go. And if the participants could just stay on mute through the program, that would probably be a good thing to do. So anyway, we'll start. We'll have each of you say hello and maybe just answer the first question I have, which is, what are you seeing right now in terms of what kids are experiencing, how they're experiencing their education, and just maybe give us a reality check of what's going on right now. Gerardo, you want to start us off?
Sure. Thanks, TJ. Welcome, everybody, and just really appreciate being in this space with some pretty awesome people looking at the bios here. So that's obviously a loaded question. I feel like every question during a time of COVID is a loaded question.
Yeah.
Down to how are you is also a very loaded question. So I have a high school age daughter myself, and so I feel like the trends that I've kind of seen, and I work with middle and high school at my school. I have a 7th grade class, a 10th grade class, and I see 11th and 12th graders as well. There seem to be 3 threads that I hear more than anything else. The first is that the workload feels heavier. They are complaining that there's a whole lot of work being assigned. One of my students conceded that maybe it's just because I'm less motivated to do it and there's less time in class. Maybe it just feels like it's more, but it definitely feels like it's more. The second is a lot of students I speak with feel like they haven't been asked for their perspective on how all of this is going and what we can do to make their school experience a little bit better. Student voice, as you know, those of you who are connected to Denver Public Schools, student voice is a big talking point in DPS, rightfully. But a lot of them are expressing to me that okay, we're just kind of being told what we need to be doing, but we aren't being asked, you know, to be participants in this work that's happening. And the third thing that has come up a lot this week as DPS is poised to try to return students to classes over the next couple of weeks is that they're not confident that it's going to be any better. You know, and with restrictions, with strict guidelines that they have to go to, TJ, you know that this is the third time that DPS has planned to return to school this year.
Yeah.
And so what I'm experiencing with students and with young people and with my own teenager is that they want us available for them, and we need flexibility as we engage them. So these are some things that are kind of popping up for me. Definitely, there's a lot more, obviously, but I think I would like to hear from other people as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. Elaine, would you like to weigh in?
Thanks very much. It's great to be here. And my feelings are very similar to others. And I teach students from early elementary right up to end of high school. And sometimes I work with kids or students in college. But my breadth has been quite different. My elementary students are just pleased as punch to be with their friends. I mean, you know, they're just so lonely. And they're happy to go in. Some of them have new teachers, which is a challenge for them as well, because we know we have quite a significant teacher shortage in BVSD. We have virtually zero subs. So they're just happy to be in the building and to be amongst their friends. My middle schoolers are feeling the push for an enormous amount of work funneled through them on the screen. My middle schoolers that I see, and I just should tell you that I work as a tutor offering special education support for IEPs and the minutes on IEPs. So it's a compensatory kind of support for kids who are on IEPs or 504s and are just not getting their minutes. It's virtually impossible to do that. So, and we're not, those kids in upper elementary and middle school are not seeing the differentiation of curriculum. They're frustrated with that. They're not getting the help that they would typically get face-to-face, either in a pull-out situation or in a team-taught situation. So they're just being served up typically the curriculum as it is, and they're having to I'm really teaching them how to negotiate. If you need more time in an assignment because it's documented in your IEP, which is a federally regulated document, as is a 504 under the American with Disabilities Act, you need to be your own best advocate. So I'm spending a lot of time telling kids, don't be afraid. That's what teachers are paid for. They're paid to deliver curriculum. They're accountable for delivering the curriculum, and you need to make sure that you can show mastery of what you're doing, given extra time or presenting in a different way. And then my high schoolers, same thing. It just seems that they're drinking out of a fire hose. And there's so many videos and so many links. And I've got to say that my kids got pretty good at figuring out where to go for each teacher. Some teachers are posting on Schoology, some are on Infinite Campus, some have their own website. So it becomes this patchwork of where do I find my assignments? Who do I talk to? How do I talk to them? And most of my students that I see privately are very, very diligent. They have a lot of parent support and they really want to do well. Even though the middle schoolers are coming back in a hybrid model this week, 2 days a week, high schoolers are they're still online. My elementary kids are over the moon, the fact that they get to go in and see their teachers. And the parents for my elementary school children are very happy that the teachers, and I'm sure Holly can attest to this because she's a second grade teacher, that the teachers can now see exactly what these kids are doing. It's not just firing something in that perhaps they got help with on their slide presentation, but the teachers are now seeing in a concrete way what those kids are capable of doing. So that's a very positive thing, and parents are and students are very happy for that.
Elaine, I'd love for you later on or whenever to talk a little bit more about the self-advocating, because I find it's also very difficult to expect kids to self-advocate when they're in coping mode like the rest of us sometimes. And so that I think there are definitely those that are good at that and that want to advocate and do what they need to do. And then there's others that are passengers on a speeding train. And that's what I'm raising in my house right now. Holly, would you please say hello and share your perspective of the reality check of what's going on right now?
Sure. Hi, it's good to be here tonight. I am a second grade teacher, as you know, and it's a little, I'm seeing things a little differently because in second grade and mostly in elementary school, kids do what they're told. So they don't have a lot of say. I have 2 college students and I have a high schooler. They have a lot more say. So in second grade, you know, your parent says to you, "Hey, we're going to the doctor. You're getting a shot," and the child's going to hop in the car and go. So they're going to do what they're told to do. So right now, my kids are really, really happy to be in school, and my own kids and the kids in my class and the kids in my school. So I feel like that's a little bit of a shift. No one's saying I don't like school. So kids are loving school. Kids are excited to be in school and they're really happy to be there. I was really nervous starting online. And one of the most important things to me is building a classroom community. I feel like before I can get into the bulk of what I want to teach, I really need to know my kids. And I thought, oh my goodness, how am I going to get to know a bunch of 7-year-olds on a screen? And I thought, I'm going to have to do things differently. And I ended up, I've been doing this for a long time, and I ended up going with what I've been doing for years and years. And we do a check-in every morning, and I ask my kids how they're doing, and they do a thumbs up, they do a thumbs up sideways, they do a thumbs down, and we share out how we're feeling every morning. And it gives me so much information about these kids. So day one, I started doing that with my class. And we're at the point now where my kids are going triple thumbs up, and I'm thinking, you only have 2, but they're really happy to be in school. And I don't know how long this is going to last. We've been online, we've been in person, we've been back online, and we're back in person again. And I feel like it's worked really well for us. I feel really fortunate, but I feel like it's worked really well both ways. It's worked well online and it's worked well in person. And I think as a teacher, if you have the attitude like, this is great, I say to my kids, friends, we're going to do the most exciting thing. We're going to pick up trash. And they're like, we're going to pick up trash. That's amazing. So I think as a teacher, if you're excited and you show that, you're positive, your kids are going to follow suit. So we have Friday songs that we sing that we did online and we did in person. And when we're in person, we put it's a Bruno Mars song and a will.i.am song focusing on positivity and growth mindset and being a friend. And I put the songs up on the big screen and the kids all sing along. And I thought, you know what? We're going to do it online too. And that's just the way it is. So I shared my screen and the kids were singing, and I took video because the kids were out of their chairs and they were dancing. And I had parents email me saying, oh my gosh, my child's so happy. And they can be happy. So I understand it's a really hard time for everybody. Like I said, I have a sophomore in high school, and it's not always easy, but it's also not always awful and hard too.
That sounds, the dancing on the chairs and being excited and the novelty of being back sounds like me. Like if I ever get to go to a dinner party again, I'm probably going to be like, "Wah!" or go bowling with my friends or something. So Holly, I'm going to stick with you for a second and ask you, I mean, you're back. Gerardo, some those of us in Denver were not back yet. From the child's perspective, from the student's perspective, Holly, what is different now about school than before the pandemic? I mean, obviously, I think there's some novelty and everything's exciting. Everyone's happy to be back, but like, is anything going to be different for them? How are they going to experience
Just real
school?
quick,
Yeah.
the early childhood programs in DPS have been in person for all but about 4 weeks. So
Okay.
so it isn't all of DPS, but yeah, middle and high school, we've been remote this entire school year. So just point of
Yep.
clarification.
Yeah. I guess I'm just trying to get at what is different about school from the way it might have been a year and a half ago. Holly?
I would say what I've seen is that children are much more adept with technology, which is something I feel like they need to have anyways. And we were almost, I don't know, in a way forced to gain that knowledge really, really quickly. So I have 7-year-olds who are basically tech geniuses, which is again something that I think is pretty positive. As far as things that are different, we're wearing masks all day long. We're washing our hands a lot more. We're really aware of how we feel. If we're feeling sick, we're not coming to school, all of which, I mean, maybe other than the masks, all of which probably should have been happening before anyways. I
Cool.
don't know. It's been really nice to be back.
Gerardo, and then we'll go to Elaine.
Yeah, a little bit of a different experience with technology. I think the conventional wisdom and the stereotype of young people is that they're all tech geniuses. They play a lot of games. They're on social media a lot, so they know technology, right? I think it doesn't take into account like that general assumption, not Holly's specific knowledge and experience, but that general assumption assumes that there's digital equity in our community. So in the spring, I was dropping off AP World History preparation packets for my students, and as they kind of like got ready for the test, just driving around the city of Denver, my students come from every corner of Denver. I understood why they didn't have good internet. If you're in Southwest Denver, there's not a good connection anywhere. You're struggling all the time. Your connection gets dropped. There's all this interference. If you're in Southeast Denver, always good. Like all my students in Southeast Denver were getting A's. There was a whole lot of onboarding we needed to do with some of the apps that we had. I had students who didn't know how to make a Google slideshow, right? Who didn't know how to, find simple things within Schoology. And then Elaine, my heart goes out to you with all these students who are trying to navigate these different platforms. At my school, my principal made a maybe unpopular decision to make us all use the same platform for hosting assignments and posting updates and doing all that kind of stuff. And that's one of the things that the students had really struggled with in the spring, because to your point, some on IC, some on Google Classroom, some on Schoology, some weren't using any of those. And it was a little frustrating. And so, I think one of the things that we have struggled with in DPS, and I see it all the time. I'm on a Google Meet today, and there's the same group of 3 or 4 students who are leaving the meeting, coming back, leaving, coming back, leaving, coming back, and they're messaging me through the Remind app and saying, I'm sorry I keep leaving, Mr. Munoz. My internet keeps on crashing. My computer's not very good. Everything's slow. I was supposed to get a new computer from the school, but it's this busted one that's missing keys. And so a lot of it has been trying to manage technology issues that are really significant. And you spend a good amount of your time teaching students how to use these platforms because they haven't always had access, and their parents definitely don't have this kind of experience to support them. So you find yourself doing a lot of that kind of work. The positive side of that is I've gotten a lot closer to my families. I'm on the phone with immigrant parents, with non-English speaking parents, with parents from working class backgrounds, and we're just talking through all of the struggles that they're kind of seeing. And so I think that at the end of this, we're going to be a lot closer. our community could be a lot closer because frankly, we're a school with 78% free and reduced lunch. So we've had to go a lot of extra miles to ensure that we're keeping students engaged. And I think we're the second highest attendance school in DPS right now. So, but it's a lot.
Yeah. So back to the question I was asking, because I want to make sure to get your perspective on it. What do you expect the student experience? How do you expect the student experience to be when you do go back, when your students come back? How do you expect the in-school student experience to be different than it was a year ago or a year and a half ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think that because the conditions under which we'll be going back are going to be really different. So in DPS, there are a lot of guidelines around distancing, around cohorts, around where you can kind of go back and forth. We have to have assigned seats. I don't have assigned seats typically, so that's going to be a real adjustment for my students. And I think that they're all very, very apprehensive. They don't feel safe going back. They keep hearing these reports about vaccines. And so a lot of what we're kind of working on is how do we take care of the social emotional well-being of our students while still trying to keep them engaged in school. And so I expect that there's going to be a lot of uncertainty and a lot of anxiety among students. I think they'll be happy to see each other. A lot of them haven't seen each other in almost a year in person. And I think that eventually will be good. But I assume that they just wanted to be back. When we talked about being back in October, students were really happy, and then guidelines came out and they were a little less happy. This month, I expected them to be excited for the prospect of coming back. And I'm just not feeling a lot of that enthusiasm, which means to me that we've got to be really intentional about the conditions we're coming back under, and that we're all going to be flexible together, that we're going to try to find a way to work through this together.
Elaine, what are your thoughts on how the experience from the student perspective is going to be different? You're muted, Elaine.
I think it's dependent on the age level, elementary, middle, and high school too. I think the kids that I work with that are going back into elementary that I see only one of them in person, and that's for very specific reasons. And the other time that I see this student, it's virtual. But the fatigue that even the youngest kids have experienced is really coming out. So it's coupled with the thrill of going back into the building, to go to the gym, to be in a classroom, to have their stuff, their identity, particularly the little ones. It's really exciting. The middle schoolers, not so much. They're only allowed in BVSD to go back 2 days a week, and they're split into like Group A or Group B. So some go Tuesday, Wednesday, some go Thursday, Friday. So it's not like the real thing. Like going back into school. So again, I think there's a sense of disappointment amongst students who are cognizant of how different it is. It's not going to be the same. And so that builds resilience among students, even the students that I teach who have learning challenges and emotional challenges and behavioral challenges. So, and this is a historical moment for kids. And I say, you need to really be aware of what works for you.
Yeah.
And it can be completely different from everybody else. So it's building a sense of identity, a sense of resilience, a sense of, I can do this. And I will do this because my education is important to me. I have my family behind me. BVSD is certainly a different environment. When I left teaching permanently, I was working at Adams City Middle School in Commerce City, 99% free and reduced.
Yeah. So,
it's a whole different kettle of fish where kids are getting Chromebooks in 4th, 5th grade, here in BVSD. And that doesn't happen in other districts, as we find out. So I just think that kids in general tend to be, if they're told the truth, if they're respected for their differences, they can really step up. And I don't mean just differences in black or brown. languages you speak, but differences in learning, that kids are now beginning to identify what works best for them. Some kids really like being online because they can move at their own pace and the bullies can't get them, you know, and that's a plus for kids who are shy, introverted, have a learning disability, have audio processing difficulties. They can hear things and ask questions and chat with the teacher and do it very privately. And I think that's a big plus for kids to develop their identity and, as I say, advocate for themselves. But the kids need to be told the truth about what's going on. We can't sugarcoat it. Masks all the time. I don't care how old you are.
Yeah.
Or how
It's,
brave you think you are going into that classroom and chumming up with somebody and, you know.
Angie,
TJ,
and
sorry. So, yeah. Oh, you were
I
going to
was
read
going to
Angie's.
comment. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
I was just going to do that.
Angie Rhodes, our on our board, put a comment in the chat that said, my 15-year-old opted for 100% online asynchronous learning. She doesn't want to deal with the back and forth of starting and stopping with restrictions. It actually has been healthy for her, less teenage drama. And that's so true, because like for some, the online learning has been really great and they're going to hate having to go back. You know, my son said, well, what am I going to do? I take a nap at lunch. Like, can I come home in the middle of the day and take a nap at lunch? And I'm like, no, I don't think that's okay. So, you know, there's some adjustment. Just when they get used to this online environment, for some of them, now they're losing the parts of that they liked. You were going to say, Gerardo?
Yeah, it is actually sort of interesting because, to Elaine's point, it's so important that this is actually an opportunity for students to learn a little bit about who they are. So much of school is one size fits all. And you have to find a way to fit yourself into the one size. And if you can't fit yourself into the one size, you're going to struggle. Your GPA is going to be low and you just won't be able to fulfill things. Well, I think one of the things that this pandemic has laid bare is one size doesn't fit all. And Elaine, I'm so glad you mentioned Adams City. My mother retired from Adams City High School as a teacher in the early 2000s. And, you know, even in these kinds of environments where we often patronizingly say, well, these students from poverty can't make their own decisions. They don't know who they are. You know, we have to define things. Well, even there, differentiating was really important. So when we think about that, why shouldn't your son be able to take a nap during the school day when he's worn out? Why shouldn't we? I mean, you know, and again,
He'll miss the entire afternoon. That's why he won't get up and go to the rest of the afternoon.
That's a little bit more than a nap. But, you know, I think about this and, you know, my own daughter has kind of questioned. She's like, I'm realizing that most of what I've learned, I've taught myself.
Yeah.
You know, she's taking these classes that she needs to take that are for credits, but she's reading stuff on a level that I've never even dreamt of reading. She's taught herself how to skateboard. She's doing all this other kind of stuff. And, you know, one of the things I'm thinking about is that when we think about the idea of just going back to normal, we have to think about the aspects of normal that didn't work, the aspects of normal that excluded kids, the aspects of normal that injured, you know, their psyches and their spiritual health. And for some students, to that point, this has been a very healing process. I have a student who barely came to class last year as a freshman, and now he's one of my highest performing sophomores. And he's like, I just feel like there's not as many distractions. I can kind of be here doing work. Now, I'm not saying we should stay remote forever, because I feel like that's not fun for anybody, really. But what are the options? What are the ways that schools can be flexible so that students can discover who they are and what works for them?
So I'm going to go to, I'm pushing us through a lot of questions here because we don't have much time, but you know, Elaine, you do tutoring, and I see Kim from Kumon is on the call. Hi, Kim. And with Kumon Learning Center and doing some amazing work there. So I guess my next question is, are we going to be able to make up what's been lost in the last year? I think as a parent, I worry a little bit that like this generation of kids is always going to have missed a big chunk of education. So so maybe that's just an irrational worry, but Holly, maybe you could start, because you're dealing with kids at this very critical time in their learning. Do you think that these kids are going to be playing catch up for multiple years, or what's your thought? Help ease my mind on this a little bit.
Okay, TJ, deep breath. We're going to take a deep breath. And it's gonna be okay, because it's unfortunate that there's a gap. There's always been a gap. But is it worse now? I don't think so. I think schools have always done everything they can to close the gap. And teachers are masters at meeting students where they are. So whether it was 2018 or this year, kids are going to come into classrooms at all different levels, and teachers are going to meet them exactly where they are. So in third grade, for example, part of the curriculum is for students to know how to multiply. They learn how to multiply. Well, if students come into third grade and they still aren't adding 2-digit numbers, teachers they're not going to go straight to multiplication. They're going to meet kids where they are. They're going to teach them what they need to know, and then they're going to move on. And I like to think of it a little bit like everyone is in the same boat right now. So maybe in a normal year, everyone goes 4 steps forward. And this year, everyone's going 2 steps forward, but everyone's doing it. Everyone's doing the same thing. And teachers have differentiated since the beginning of time. And we have new students that come into our classes every year in the middle of the year from somewhere else. And we teach them what they need to know. We catch them up. And what I've seen, and I've seen it with my own kids, they may be at one point academically right now, and in a year and a half, in 6 months, they could make a huge jump. And I think pandemic or no pandemic, that's going to happen.
Okay, so we're not going to see plummeting SAT scores in a couple of years, or
Well,
the SAT is going to go away. And I don't, go ahead, Gerardo.
Oh, I really apologize. Go ahead.
oh, Elaine, did you have thoughts?
Was Geraldo talking, or is he off right now?
Oh, there he is.
I mean, I was just making a side comment about how a lot of institutions of higher education are really starting to interrogate the role that standardized tests play in admissions. So a lot of schools are going test optional. Even, my daughter is at the Denver School of the Arts, and she's like, well, why am I going to apply to a place that needs test scores when the schools I want to go to will accept a portfolio instead? So I actually think there's been a lot of disruption to the testing industrial complex for a while, and I think this kind of like opens that up a little bit. The one last thing I'll say, and then Elaine, you can take over. But my wife teaches 4-year-olds, and she does have concerns about how late they're starting, but at the same time, it is one of those things. Somebody once told me that 80% of what we're going to be doing in 10 years doesn't exist. So we've not always been the best. It doesn't exist yet. So we've not always been the best predictors of what we're going to need in 10 years. And I think that as we differentiate, to Holly's point, as we adapt, as we take a gauge of the conditions around us, and I love Angie's comment about students becoming resourceful and saying, there's more than one way to learn something, and there's more than one way to figure out how to problem solve something. I'm home, I should try to figure that out. I think there are a lot of possibilities for that.
Elaine, are our kids going to be digging out of a hole? What do you think?
I think not, as long as we get rid of standardized tests at the state level. And that's my own personal opinion. Having done that for decades and decades, starting about mid-February, drop the curriculum. Okay, everybody, let's march down to the computer lab. Okay, no, that's not how you do it. No, you have to do it like this, do it like this, do this. Okay, march back. Okay, and then we'll spend the next 4 weeks prepping for a state test that is not aligned with my curriculum. So you are testing my students based on usually the publisher's textbook, who happens also to be the originator and writer of our state tests here in Colorado. And also I think teachers, as if I was in a classroom, back in my classroom again, I just want the time to teach. I don't want to prep for tests. My kids don't have standardized brains. Why are you testing them with a standardized test? All of my students are different. And I, as an educational consultant, I do academic assessments, but I am using normed tests that are recognized worldwide. They are not gender specific. They are not culturally specific. And they're looking at, I look and produce raw data that is accurate and authentic for what those kids can do at this moment, not a curriculum laid on by or a test that's laid on by the same people who produce the textbooks that we're supposed to be funneling into the brains. So it's just, I'm pleased as punch that we're getting back to teaching, and perhaps even letting go this, as we did last year, because it was the onset of this. And we thought we were going to be back in 2 weeks. And so we'll just pick up and, again, drop the curriculum. Let's move to academic behaviors so that we can get the data points that the district needs to put into the Denver Post to see just which schools are the very best. That's my personal and professional experience, both in Canada and the United States. And I'm happy to say that the kids, if they can be relieved of that stress because they've already had enough, yeah, do your iReady or whatever the district has purchased or signed up from CDE from their menu, because they need to have that as their 3 touch points throughout the year. That's less intrusive than the big tests like the CMAS test that comes down from the state. I don't know if the other 2 folks here would agree with that, but I can tell you that it causes an enormous amount of stress with students and parents and teachers.
One of our participants chimed in that she has something she wants to share that's relevant to this string. So Erica, do you want to unmute and share quickly what you wanted to throw in?
Yeah, thanks for letting me do this, because I saw this almost a month ago, and it's by a teacher named Teresa Snyder. She teaches middle school out of this state, but she says, she wrote an open letter. Dear friends and colleagues, I'm writing today about the children of this pandemic. After a lifetime of working among the young, I feel compelled to address the concerns that are being expressed by so many of my peers about the deficits the children will demonstrate when they finally return to school. My goodness, what a disconcerting thing to be concerned about in the face of a pandemic, which is affecting millions of people around the country and the world. It speaks to one of my biggest fears for the children when they return. In our determination to catch them up, I fear that we will lose who they are and what they have learned during this unprecedented era. What on earth are we trying to catch them up on? The models no longer applied, the benchmarks are no longer valid, the trend analyses have been interrupted. We must not forget that these arbitrary measures were established by people not ordained by God. We can make these invalid measures as obsolete as a crank-up telephone. They simply do not apply. When the children return to school, they will have returned with a new history, and that we will need to help them identify and make sense of. When the children return to school, we will need to listen to them, let their stories be told. They have endured a year that has no parallel in modern times. There is no assessment that applies to who they are or what they have learned. She goes on.
Yeah.
But, when we talk about already assessments sometimes are a straitjacket, what can we as parents out here help? How can we help shift the paradigm to include this kind of thinking, social emotional growth, and this kind of thinking?
Awesome. Thank you, Erica. Elaine, you want to respond to that?
That's a great, I've read several pieces like that over the last couple of months. Remember that when we do state tests, that's a snapshot of your child. It's not a continuum from where they started in August, where they got to in December, where they got to in March. And again, I can't stress enough that these standardized tests do not test the curriculum with which your child has been presented. It may or may not be applicable to their cognitive state and growth. So I always tell kids, it's just one day, one snapshot at a time. And you've been working so hard all semester to learn multiplication. If you can't apply that to, fractions, decimals, and percentages, that's okay. You learn multiplication. That's what you were supposed to learn this year. So we're looking at a year's growth in a year. And those tests, because I've done so many of them and had so many kids in so many labs, the more answers they get correct, the more the bar is raised and the questions become more and more difficult, way beyond a 4th grader or a 5th grader, 6th grader's curriculum and expectations that is presented over the years. So these kids are thinking, well, I'm doing really well. And then they hit their ceiling and they can't go any further. and they're all alone on a keyboard. And some kids are so savvy and hate the test so much that they just do this. So sometimes they score outside and look like, they're above grade level, but they're struggling. Or they do this and they get what I call click happy, and they score a lot lower than they would. Because we've got them in a lab, and that's a situation that's teachers are doing their best to monitor in the lab of how it's done. And so those tests are more often than not authentic and accurate data points for what where your child is currently academically, nor does it show growth. And that's what we're into. We're looking at growth.
Holly, did you have a thought?
I was just thinking to tag on to what you're saying, Elaine, is that these tests don't define who the children are. So nowhere on the test does it ask, are you kind? Are you creative? Tell me about a picture you drew. Tell me about a play you were in. Tell me how you helped a friend. Have you ever cooked dinner? Have you ever taken care of a family member? Have you written a grocery list? I mean, things that actually matter when kids are going to grow up and be in people, adults in the world. Those things aren't ever taken into account. So I've told my own kids over and over and over, my own children, that the score on the test does not define them. It doesn't take into consideration, did you have a stomach ache? Is your grandma sick? Did you not sleep well the night before? It's a snapshot. It's like Elaine said, it's one moment in time. And I think too much emphasis is placed on the number.
Let's talk a little bit about Gerardo. Did you have something? I'm sorry, did I interrupt you?
If it's okay, yeah.
Yeah, please.
I think and Erica, thank you for sharing that. The phrase from that piece that keeps echoing with me is a new history, and I'm a history teacher. And one of the things we spend a lot of time talking about in my world history classes is how critical it is that people living through a particular moment bear witness to that moment. That it can be really hard to write things down right now. It can be really hard to get out your phone and record your thoughts or share your thoughts with somebody else. But when you do that, you are creating a history for future generations to learn from. And that's a really powerful thing. It makes me think of something that Cornelius Minor talks about. And he's the author of We Got This, one of the great pedagogy books that I've read lately. And he talks about how centering what students are feeling and experiencing and how they're reacting to COVID now and later on can actually create a new way of addressing problems, describing problems, responding to them, and that kind of thing. And so, Erica, you asked what parents can do to start breaking some of this thinking that seems to be held institutionally. I would argue that the cult of achievement isn't preserved in the hearts and souls of the teachers. 9 out of 10 teachers are going to tell you, I want to teach my kids. I want to make sure that they grow up feeling like free and good people and like they can make decisions in their own lives and advocate for themselves. These are where we have to challenge some things structurally. So when we go into schools, when we participate in things, we advocate for that whole child, which is not a new concept, but we start advocating for what kind of community are we building in this place? How are we practicing community, and how are we practicing spiritual, intellectual, and physical health, not just achievement?
Beautiful. So time check.
Does that mean also then I should get the emails of all the BVSD administration and my principal?
So time check. We have about 15 minutes left, and so now we're going to go into the speed round here, if it's okay, for our panelists. Yeah, I just have one question, but I'm kind of looking for speed answer. Like, give me some action items here, and that is, okay. So I have a teenager trying to look after his emotional health in the best of circumstances is a challenge. What can parents at all different levels do to try to support the emotional wellness of their children as they adjust to what's going on in the next, let's say in the next 12 months? Anybody want to raise their hand and go first on any of the panelists want to go first on that? Emotional well-being, speed round. Go, Gerardo.
Encourage breaks, allow them to engage in humanity, be willing to say to a student, yo, I know your life sucks right now. It's so hard. Let's go do something fun right now. And really encourage them to listen to themselves and take a break.
Love it.
I agree. And also balancing, there's sports teams now coming in, and we have our sports stable. My son just graduated from Metro, and he's working there with hockey teams and baseball teams, and they're coming back and getting kids involved in things that give them a more balanced life, but also just letting them know what the real situation is. Let's not sugarcoat it for these kids. They're smart. They can access the internet faster than you can get dinner on the table, so they'll know. But really give them some balance and give them breaks when they need it, and have them advocate for themselves to get those breaks, extensions, repetitions, alternate curriculum, so that they can show what they know.
Holly?
Okay, speed round. I'd
Ah,
say.
we don't have to be that fast.
I'd say be a good role model. Listen to your kids, acknowledge how they're feeling, validate how they're feeling, tell them you're right. It is hard, but you're going to get through it. We're all going to get through it together. Do things as a family, get outside. They spend a lot of time in front of the screen. Even if they're in school, we're doing all of our specials online. So my kids are doing art and music by watching a screen. So they don't need any more screen time. Go outside, do something for someone else, help someone else. When kids think back, they're not going to remember exact moments. You don't remember the day you learned to multiply, the day you learned to conjugate a verb. You remember a feeling. So how did you feel during this time? How did you feel sophomore year in high school? How did you feel in second grade? And you felt good and you loved it. And it's because of doing those kind of things.
Awesome.
Couple of quick things. Their moods change really quickly. And I think part of what was difficult for me, for my daughter in early adolescence, was that I wasn't ready for her to go from really down to really up to really down to really up to, right now it's like 4 hours in a room and then wants to talk for an hour and a half. And, sometimes it means dropping the things that I think are so important that I really need to do at the end of the day. I need to be able to say to my boss, my kid needs my time right now, so I'm going to go and take that time. And then also ask them to talk a little bit about what they want to accomplish in the future. What are some things they wish they knew how to do? Cook together, tell stories, that kind of thing. So really connect to the things that they like. And Holly, I love what you said about listening to them and listen to them without kind of prejudice. Like, as parents, we're so worried about what their future is going to look like, and we're worried about them falling off track, whatever that is, that we get kind of defensive if they express ambivalence about that kind of thing. And I think for me personally, it's been a lot to say, okay, it's time to step out of what my experience was and what my assumptions are, and let me just hear this kid and validate what they're saying and doing. And yeah, make them go outside. I've even emailed her teacher saying, by the way, my child will not be in your class today. I'm not letting her have screen time today because she's exhausted and she needs a break. And if you have an issue with that, please contact me. But this is what I need for my child right now.
And I'm Colorado Teacher of the Year, so there
That's
you
right.
go.
That's right.
Yeah, you get to pull that card. You get to pull that. Yeah, sorry. Have you seen my card? Let me give you my LinkedIn.
Yeah, sorry. Am I still sharing my screen?
So we're wrapping up here, and if anybody has any additional questions that didn't get answered, please put them in the chat. I can also put you in touch with these amazing panelists if you need to. You can reach me at tj@superiorchamber.com anytime you need to. So I'm just going to go to each panelist, and this is your chance to kind of give your closing thoughts. This program was called "What Do Our Kids Need From Us Right Now?" I really wanted people who took the time to tune in to get a sense of hope. And I've heard some amazing things like less rigid standardization, appreciation of school, more resilient and resourceful, closer ties to families and communities. So you've already made me feel better that there is hope and that we're not in a horrible, dire situation. I'm a worrier by nature, as a parent and as a professional. So maybe you could just wrap up with some thoughts on what advice you would give to parents in general about emotional or support or anything in terms of what should they be doing in the coming months and maybe even this summer to make their kids healthy, strong, and good learners. Holly, you want to go first?
Sure. So I just want to say this is really hard, and knowing that it's really hard for all of us, whether you're 7 or 17 or 37, 47, it's tough. And I I have a freshman in college, so she was a senior in high school last year. And literally, I would go into the grocery store and people would be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." I mean, it was brutal. It was hard. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, you know what? My daughter didn't get to experience her graduation. She didn't get to experience senior prom. She didn't have senior prank day, but she had no idea what that felt like. I knew what it felt like because I had all those things. So it was almost as if it was worse for the parents because we knew what they were missing. And for the kids, this was just happening. And yeah, it was sad and it was unbelievably hard, but they were going through it together. And I think there was a mourning period for parents. And when I look at it now, she's in college, thank goodness, and she's going through this same pandemic. It's still going on with a group of other young adults who have experienced the same thing she had. They did not have prom, they did not have graduation. And when they do finally get all of those things, because they will, because this will come to an end, it's going to be the biggest event ever. And she will be celebrating with people who are feeling the same. And it's not going to be like a graduation that we've experienced before. It's not going to be a moment like that. I mean, I know people that didn't go to their college graduation. Well, that's not going to happen to this class. They're going to show up and they're going to show up excited and happy, and it's going to be a big celebration. So I guess my closing thoughts are that acknowledge what's going on, know that this is really hard, do what you can to be positive, be a positive role model, and it's going to end. Think about how happy everyone's going to be. You're going to be dancing on your chair, TJ, you said.
I love it. Elaine, closing thoughts.
I think the difficulties and the stress and the fatigue are bringing people quite close together, particularly kids who, are struggling to be heard and understood. And that's the population that I'm serving. And the parents are very concerned. And I get a lot of calls from people. BV Kids stands for Boulder Valley Kids Identified with Dyslexia. If that's, I'm on the board and have been there since the inception. We now have screeners at kindergarten for flagging students that are coming in with learning difficulties in language development. So that took 4 years. And now it's happening. So I think that we're going to be identifying kids quickly and helping them. Parents building a strong relationship with your child, and parents building a strong relationship with the teachers who are really, they're going a million miles an hour, taking their curriculum and digitalizing it as quickly as they possibly can. I just want to, I want to say that for teachers, I'm digitalizing everything I've got, 30 plus years, and also buying personally. And I know that teachers have done this out of their own, on their own time, on their own dime, buying platforms that enrich the teaching. Because it's just too hard to take paper and continually scan it and put it out there all the time. So I want to give props to teachers. I'm doing it on my own, and I know lots of teachers are. I think that this is a very, for sure, difficult time, but it brings kids really close, and different districts have different experiences. BVSD is highly fortunate. Chromebooks don't seem to be in short supply, and if they break, man, we got a new one coming up tomorrow for you. So I feel fortunate for those kids as well. And it also, I think, lays bare the inequity in education that needs to be addressed right now, last year. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? My kids that I taught at 6th grade at Commerce City Middle School, they're going to coffee shops and somewhere where they can pick up a link so that they can get on internet. They're not sitting in, on a pottery barn couch in their living room with their mom or dad's, great computer. So I think that there's been some really great things that have come out of this. And I think it's pulling the students closer and closer together because they have this highly unique experience this year that I think is going to set them apart from kids that came before and kids that are coming after. These are the sort of pioneer kids, in a sense, that have learned to shift their learning from face to face to more independence and a clearer identity of who they are as learners. And I think that's very positive.
Thank
I
you,
feel
Elaine.
very positive about the whole setup.
Thank you, Elaine.
My pleasure.
Gerardo, you get to take us out. Give us
Okay.
your closing thoughts there, please.
All right. Now, those are two really hard acts to follow. So, Holly and Elaine, it's just a real honor to be on here and, absorb your perspectives. It means so much. I would say for me, it breaks down to three things that we can get really excited about: community, creativity, and advocacy. So I think one thing we've learned, both at a macro level, maybe coming from a global, system of governance, is we can't face these problems alone. We can't face them in a vacuum. We can't face them as individuals. It doesn't matter how rugged of an individual you are. If there isn't sound policy and structure in place to protect and support populations in moments of crisis, then the struggle will become increasingly real. And so we need each other. And I think I've approached my students in my classes with the attitude of, well, how are we reinventing school today? How are we building what we need today? I need to know, because I've never taught in a pandemic. You've never learned in a pandemic. You probably have a better perspective than I do. So let's all work together. We need each other. We need our communities to be together on things. I heard this morning on the news that, and this gets into the creativity piece, that entrepreneurship, the rate of entrepreneurship and new sort of entrepreneurial pursuits is through the roof right now. And, I'm sure if we break that down, it can maybe be a little disillusioning. But when you think about it, there are people creating during this time. What do we create out of this moment? What is that thing that you absolutely realize you can't live without? Whether it's a sport that you haven't been able to play for a while, whether it's wellness, whether it's writing, whether it's music, what is that thing that is saving you right now? Like the feeling of doing that. So what are we creating out of this? And I think that it isn't a small coincidence that there's out of the tiniest of spaces, creative solutions to things come up. And the last thing is advocacy. I teach a community organizing class, and one of the students in that class said, the deal is, I never, ever, ever, ever want anybody to have to deal with some of the inequities that we have. I don't want my child in the future to go to a school that doesn't have HVAC, circulation. I don't ever want my kids or my friends or my community members to live in a place where they can't get high-speed internet, no matter how much they spend on it. And so what I'm seeing from some of my students is that I'm going to demand that supports are there when I'm an adult for others that we don't have right now. And so I think, Elaine, in the spirit of advocacy, I think that's such a powerful thing. Maybe we do have elected officials that say, you know what, high-speed internet is not a privilege. It is a civil right, and it is absolutely necessary in the 21st century that everybody have access, that there's digital equity. And I think that this could, as long as we're able to stay together as a community and really just encourage each other, this could actually create a new generation of people who are going to ensure that there's access and equity for everybody.
Well, thank you for that. I went to a museum this past weekend. I drove down to Colorado Springs and went to the new Olympic and Paralympic museum, which is open. And like most museums, you exit through the gift shop. And I thought that was a little bit of a metaphor for what I hope is leaving this pandemic is going to be like. We're gonna go through all this, and we're gonna end up in the gift shop, and maybe we can all at that point celebrate all the things that are possible, and spend our resources and find some grace and all those kind of things. I want to thank all of the panelists, Gerardo, Holly, Elaine, for being part of this. We're going to post this video on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page. So please share it around, comment on it if you enjoyed this tonight. Just fundamentally, the Chamber is honored to be able to do this sort of programming for our community. I just thank you very much, everybody, for signing up for this and for being part of our audience tonight. Thank you so much, and have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.